Okay, everybody, let's get started. It's noon. And just as a reminder, we record all of these. So the Lunch and Learn webinars are recorded, the virtual teaching kitchens are recorded, and so they are always located on Florida Cancer's YouTube channel if you want to revisit them or if you end up missing them for whatever reason. So just a little housekeeping there for you. So today we are talking about salt or sodium. A lot of us get too much salt in our diet. A lot of us need to cut back on salt. But how do we do that? The most common complaint I get when I talk to people about healthy eating is that, oh, you just want me to take out everything that tastes good. Or if they're eating something low fat or heart healthy, there's no flavor, there's no seasoning because it's low sodium. So how do we make food taste good without all the extra salt? That's what we're going to dive into today. Okay. So first, oh, it would help if there we go. Um, let's talk about types of salt and why we want to cut back. So you might see sea salt, light salt, table salt, sodium. They're all salt. Now, if we look at sea salt, the grains, the little granules of salt are larger. So if you're using a measuring spoon, a tablespoon of sea salt actually contains less sodium technically than say table salt, because with table salt, the grains are smaller and so there's more of it. It fits, more of it fits into the tablespoon. Whereas with sea salt, the grains are larger, so you get less per serving, per tablespoon serving. But at the end of the day, it's all salt. It all contributes. Salt, a lot of salt in the diet can affect blood pressure. It may cause bloating, cramping, fluid retention. Salt is often hidden in foods. So it's not often the salt that we use, the little bit of salt we use in cooking at home that causes high sodium. It's often in the processed foods, the restaurant meals, and we're going to get into that more. The recommended allowance for sodium is less than 2,300 milligrams per day. Now that's a general recommendation for health. If you have kidney disease or kidney problems, if you have high blood pressure or other heart issues, your doctor may want you on a more restricted sodium diet, something like 1,500 milligrams maybe instead of 2,300. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit also. So where do we find salt? Chips, processed cheeses, fast food, frozen meals, your ham, like the packaged sliced ham or cubes of ham, boxed meals like the shake and bake stuff or the pre-made sauces and gravies. So a lot of your pre-made, packaged, boxed, frozen goods are packed full of sodium to make them taste better, to give them flavor. And so again, it's not necessarily what we're cooking with, but a lot of times it's what we're purchasing. Okay. And I threw this in. If you were with me a few months ago for decoding the food label, you have seen these graphics before. So just as a reminder, when you are shopping, keep in mind if you're looking at canned goods or packaged products, that if something says it is reduced sodium, that doesn't necessarily mean low sodium. Reduced just means that it's about 25% less than the original. So the original could be really high, 25% less could still be really high, but they get to call it reduced sodium. Okay, so the things that you want to look for whenever possible are sodium free. That means that it is less than 5 milligrams. Low sodium means that it's less than 140 milligrams. And then light would be 50% less. So again, that's a little bit of a gray area. It depends on how much sodium there was to start with, but light is absolutely going to be lower than reduced. Okay, so the reduced sodium is a little bit tricky when you're looking at labels. Also, when you are looking at a food label on a package, and here's our sodium right here, 160 milligrams. So when you look at this percent daily value, if you're not sure if something is high or low, this is a great guide. 5% or less is considered low. 20% or more of your daily value is considered high. Another way to think about it, if we estimate per meal, 3 meals a day per meal, there's 500 milligrams of sodium in the product or in your meal. That's 1,500 for the day, not including if you have any snacks or anything else that has sodium in it. So if the goal is 2,300 or less, ballparking it around 500 for a meal would be reasonable. Okay. And of course, some are going to be a little higher than that. You're not necessarily going to have 500 milligrams of sodium at breakfast. You may have 600 or 700 milligrams at dinner, which is okay if the rest of your day is reasonable. Okay. So just as you're looking at labels, keep those things in mind as a helpful tool for you. So how do we reduce sodium in our diet? The first thing is to eat more whole foods, to cook more and to eat less processed food. If we know that most of the salt in our diet is coming from those processed items. Eating more fruits and vegetables, which are both naturally very low in sodium. Slowly cut back on salt. So if you're even at home pretty heavy-handed with the salt shaker, reduce a little bit at a time. Don't go cold turkey, because then everything will taste like it has no flavor and you'll be mad at me. But start to slowly decrease the amount of salt that you're using. Your taste buds adapt after a few weeks. You get used to having less over time. And then when you have something really salty and your taste buds are used to not having really salty foods, you really notice it more. You go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was so salty. I don't remember that being so salty. And it's because your taste buds have changed. Using more herbs and spices when cooking. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this today. If we're taking away the salt, which typically is what we lean on to flavor our meals and our food, we have to replace it with something else. We have to add flavor somewhere else to make the food taste good, right? So let's talk about those spices. That we use them for more than just flavoring food. They do enhance the food's flavor without salt, but they also are potent antioxidants. So they have, that immune boosting support. They have other phytochemicals that are good for us and our immune system. They sometimes, in a few studies, have been shown to maybe improve certain chronic diseases like inflammation, blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol. They can help with nausea. So just to name a few that have been studied more, not all spices have had a lot of research behind them, but cinnamon, for example, has been shown in some studies to possibly lower blood sugar. In type 2 diabetes, it is not a substitute for your diabetic medications. Please do not go home and stop taking your meds because you're adding cinnamon to your oatmeal. However, it may help to lower that blood sugar in addition to your medications. There have also been some studies to suggest it may help lower cholesterol and triglycerides. Turmeric has had a lot of research behind it showing that it has anti-inflammatory properties. Specifically, the component of turmeric called curcumin is what's shown to have those anti-inflammatory properties. There have also been some studies showing that curcumin may slow cognitive and memory decline. They've been looking at it in people with Alzheimer's disease. There have been some animal studies that have shown maybe some benefit in combination with chemo to shrink tumors, to slow the tumor growth. And because it's an anti-inflammatory, it may help reduce pain and swelling with arthritis. Again, this is not on its own. You're probably not going to use turmeric by itself without your regular medications. And remember, I said in combination with chemo may help shrink tumors. So just remember those words, right? When you go home and you're implementing this, have turmeric in your diet, use it in your cooking. It may help provide some of those benefits. We use ginger a lot as an antiemetic for nausea. Ginger has been shown in a lot of studies to just help with upset stomach. And again, it's typically not strong enough alone to not use your nausea medications, but for mild upset stomach, ginger can be very useful. Garlic has been shown to possibly minimize the cholesterol buildup in the arteries and keep blood vessels more flexible over time. It may also reduce cholesterol and triglycerides. Now, I say all of that to recommend that you use it in cooking. You're flavoring your food and you're also giving yourself some of these benefits. I am not recommending that you run out and buy capsules and take supplements of all of these things. There's a lot we don't know about supplements. We've talked about supplements before in the fact that they're not regulated. You don't actually know how much you're getting all the time. The dose is so much more concentrated than if you use it naturally. With a lot of these herbs, we don't know if there's an upper limit as far as can you take too much for it to be harmful. So I would much rather you take these herbs, cinnamon, turmeric, oregano, garlic, ginger, peppermint, all of these flavors that can help flavor your food, provide the antioxidants, maybe provide some of these other health benefits in your diet, and at the same time, help you reduce your sodium intake. So how do we use these different herbs and spices? So preferably fresh herbs and spices pack a lot more flavor, but we don't all have herb gardens out in our backyard. So if a recipe calls for a tablespoon of fresh herbs, you're going to cut that for dried herbs. So only a teaspoon of dried if the recipe calls for a tablespoon of fresh. And that's because dried herbs and ground herbs and spices, much more concentrated flavor. And so you don't need to use as much, okay? So dried herbs, a teaspoon, ground herbs, even less, about a half of a teaspoon to that tablespoon of fresh, okay? If you do have some fresh herbs, because you can buy them in little packages in the grocery store, or maybe you are growing them in your backyard, those fresh herbs can be refrigerated for about 3 to 4 days. Wrap them in a damp paper towel, put them in a plastic bag, and then you can use them for a few days before they start to go bad. Now, how to use them in your food. I mentioned oatmeal. Cinnamon is fantastic to brighten up and flavor oatmeal. You could also put it in your coffee or plain yogurt with a little drizzle of honey and some fresh fruit. You could do some fresh basil with maybe mozzarella and tomato on a grilled cheese sandwich. Um, Herbed scrambled eggs, and this is just a little teaser for next month in my virtual teaching kitchen. We're going to be using a basil pesto to flavor some scrambled eggs and veggies. So that's a great way to flavor your eggs, jazz things up a bit without using so much salt. You could add mint or basil with some cut up fresh fruit to help flavor your water naturally. Just use more with cooking. And a lot of times people get scared when they cook. They don't know what to add or how much to add. And this is how I kind of learned to cook. My mom taught me this. If it smells good together, it will probably taste good together. So if you're holding a couple of different canisters of herbs, a couple of little containers of herbs, and you smell them together, if they smell pretty good, then chances are they're going to taste pretty good. Start small. If you're not sure how much to add, start with a half a teaspoon. We go back to those measurements. A quarter to a half a teaspoon, 1 teaspoon. Don't just dump a tablespoon of dried herbs on your chicken. Start small, see what it tastes like, see what it smells like. You can always add more. If you put too much in at the start, you can't take it away. Okay. Um, you could take some curry powder or turmeric and mix that into plain yogurt. Use it as a sandwich spread or a vegetable dip. My favorite way to cook zucchini is to sprinkle it with some dill and some fresh ground black pepper and then saute it or roast it or grill it. But I love dill in my zucchini. I also really like it with my eggs. Um, Asparagus is amazing with a little bit of lemon zest and oregano. Before roasting chicken or turkey, you drizzle a little olive oil on there and sprinkle it with rosemary. Those are just a handful of ways to use some of these herbs, okay? And just again, as more options for you. Now, I didn't put the whole recipe in here. So if you're interested in any of these, jot down the link or jot down the name of the recipe. They're easily Googled. But this is from AICR, the American Institute for Cancer Research. So summer squash ribbons. I have one of those handheld spiralizers that I can make zucchini noodles and the yellow squash noodles. If you don't have one of those, you can just slice them, do long, thin slices of your zucchini and squash. And then there's a recipe here for a lemon and herb dressing. And just to kind of show you, that dressing has lemon juice and lemon zest, oregano, thyme, the red onion helps to flavor it. And yes, there is a pinch of salt and pepper to go in that recipe. Salt is not the enemy. We just tend to have too much of it in our diet. So a pinch for that whole dressing recipe is not that much salt because we're relying on all of those other flavors to make the dressing taste good. Another option, we mentioned a turmeric dip. Now this recipe I stole during a nutrition conference, but Wendy Bazillion came up with this recipe. So plain yogurt, and I went ahead and put the recipe because I didn't find it on the internet. Like I said, I stole it, I snagged it from a conference. So a cup of plain low-fat yogurt. I like to use Greek yogurt for veggie dip. A tablespoon of milk, a tablespoon of lemon juice, a little 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, but there's your ground turmeric, that half a teaspoon of sea salt for the whole dip, not a ton of sodium, and a little bit of cinnamon goes into that dip. You can see it pictured. It goes great with fresh veggie sticks, celery, carrots, broccoli. It actually is a really delicious dip, okay? So hopefully if you were interested, you were able to jot that down. I was trying to not advance the PowerPoint too quickly so you would have an opportunity to write it down. But if you need it, you certainly can let me know, or at the end of the slide, I can go back to it, whatever you need. Here's another option, some grilled salmon. This is from the Mayo Clinic, so you can find this on their website. And they use sesame oil, reduced sodium soy sauce. So remember we said reduced may still be a lot of sodium. It's only 25% less than the original. But you'll also notice in this recipe, there is no other salt. They're not adding a pinch or a half of a teaspoon. They recognize that that reduced sodium soy sauce is plenty salty, but it is also contributing other flavors. And then you're also getting the flavor from the sesame oil, ginger, the rice wine vinegar. It's actually really delicious. Okay, so that's an option also, something different for your salmon. And then this is one of my latest and favorites that I've come across. Eating Well. It's a magazine, but they also have a website, and you can peruse the recipes on the website without a magazine subscription. They have an article. I sign up for their weekly emails, their newsletters, and they came out with 25 plus, I think it might be a total of 28 recipes for homemade salad dressings and vinaigrettes that you can use for marinades, for your salad dressings. The sky is the limit. And just to show, I'm not going to click on the link. You can search, if you search Eating Well 25 recipes for dressings and vinaigrettes, it'll come up. But just to show you some of the variety, there's a cucumber based dressing with red wine vinegar, chives, parsley. There's a roasted garlic vinaigrette with cider vinegar. There's kind of a Mexican style with cilantro, lime juice, orange juice, and garlic. There's one that I'm really excited to make, balsamic vinegar with strawberry and Dijon mustard. So lots of variety. It's super easy to make homemade dressings. It really cuts out a lot of the sodium in some of those commercial dressings, and it really can help flavor your food. Like I said, you can use it for marinades and not just salad dressings. And then something to keep in mind as we kind of finish up and wrap up, spices don't last forever. If you've had spices in your pantry for 5+ years and you haven't opened them, you probably want to open them and give them a sniff and maybe throw them away. Um, Ground spices typically last about 2 to 3 years. Whole spices, a little bit longer, 3 to 4 years. Seasoning blends, like an Italian seasoning mix, something like that, less, 1 to 2 years. Herbs, 1 to 3 years. Now, this is not when you cut them, right? If you have fresh herbs and cut them, they're only going to last 3 to 4 days. So this is more like dried, crumbled herbs, okay, in your pantry, that you get that 1 to 3 years. And then extracts, like vanilla extract, a good 4 years, except this pure vanilla extract, which doesn't have an end date. But like I said, my recommendation to you is to smell them, right? Do the smell test. If they smell good, no issue, great. They're probably still fine. But if they smell a little off, sometimes they start to turn rancid. You'll know when it smells weird. And so use your nose, let your nose be your guide. And make sure, like I said, if you've had herbs or spices in your pantry for greater than 5 years and you haven't opened them, you probably want to replace those. Okay. But, spices, buying spices initially can be a little bit expensive, but you build up your supply over time. You build up your pantry over time. You try new recipes. You're trying one new spice, you go, you buy that one, and now you have it in your pantry. So you don't need to go out and buy 10 spices all at once. It's very pricey on the grocery bill, but a little bit at a time, you kind of build up that variety of flavor. Okay. And that's all I have for today. That is the end of my short and sweet reducing the sodium, use more spices webinar. I've got my chat box open. I've got my Q&A box open. If you have questions, comments, I can take you back to that recipe for anyone that was trying to jot it down, for the turmeric dip. Like I said, a little teaser for next month for our virtual teaching kitchen. We're going to be doing some pesto, with scrambled eggs and summer veggies. So stick with me next month. It's super easy and fast and delicious, which are my three favorite favorite things in a recipe.